one of the most forward-thinking coaches that I work with. But I was fortunate enough to work with him for so long. I didn't really get a look at what it brings that other managers done. But for me, working with him was his calmness and his compassion, and the way he wanted the game to be built, and your patience with young players. And his philosophy was that if I'm the manager and we are investing in young players through Mr. Dean and Liam Brady, then we have a right to make sure they do get the opportunity to play. But on the other side, they have to be good enough. And when you used to ask me, were they ready? I said, yeah, they're ready to play for you. You knew what that ready was. It wasn't just ready about going out there to play. It was always the mental side of things and the physical side of things, the tactical elements of the game as well. So I think we bring that. It comes with disappointment because you take, I think every squad's got 12, 16 players from, I think they're nine. At nine, they're a young age, and then they easy with them. But once they get to 12, I think they carry a squad of 15, and you have discussions how many of them are ever going to play. So if you're looking at 12s, 30s, 40s, 15s, got 15 players, that's 60 that we got. Times that by 10, that's 600 lads. Just very quickly, and that could be, that's 600 boys that you've got to look at, and you've got a welfare, and I think that what you're giving them, you have a responsibility to the care and attention for it. But I do think they make a rod, the clubs make a rod for their own back, where they do take too many young players in the system, and I think it dilutes the whole academy area. Where once again, without repeating myself, there's too many players in the system, I think.
Neil, you worked with one of the most legendary coaches of all time, hands-on with him at Arsenal through a number of years. I just want to know how that really began and how you got to know him.
Thanks, Ed, and thanks for inviting me onto your podcast.
Of course, and I really appreciate this. A bit about Neil and me. We both kind of grew up with a stammer. We're just talking about it then and our experiences with it. Neil, just to start off now, we're just talking about it now. What are your experiences with it as a young child and as a young boy growing up?
Yeah, I think I had the summer when I was young, and even now, like I'm 62 on Saturday, and even now I can still see it when I'm out and I get with friends. I get a little bit excited. It can kick in, but I learned how to control it, and over the years you've used it. It's part of where I am, and you can feel it coming. I can feel myself. I'm going to start stammering, but it's part of how you are, and I've always faced it straight on, and I've got through it, and the more you know where it is and how to deal with it, I think you'll be better for it through your ages.
When you were younger, did you attend any therapists for it or any help for it?
No, I didn't. There was none really, and there wasn't many. Yeah, I was got to say, growing up with it, it wasn't very. You laughed at a little bit when you've got your stammer, and it wasn't. And I think people now realise that no, that's not the way to deal with it. You've got to help people with it, and I think knowing a few people that I've known through football have worked with stammer and gone on, and I think it's part that you've got to deal with, and you've got to understand what it is and where it comes from. And I think once you understand that, I think you're fine.
And also, what do you say to maybe like a young inspiring coach or even player that has one is a bit, scared about it or worried about it? What do you say to them?
Oh, so don't worry about it at all. Go in and embrace it. I think because the people around it know that if you've now help you, and that's what I've found. I think people now are more open and they help people with some kind of difficulties if they're talking, but don't be worried about it. Get on and go with it. And I think it all comes down to the information you're giving, and if the good information, people will accept it, no problem.
For sure. Neil, talk to me about your childhood experiences when you were younger. Like, I really want to know. I really want to go down the route. I don't want to just start off with your career at Arsenal and stuff like that. I really want to know what made Neil who he was and who he has become.
I think where I lived and where I become is where I lived, and I think that your upbringing. I think that really leaves a mark on you through your career and through your life as a person. Growing up through the East End of London and the characters we had and everyone. I think that people say you're a bit of a character, but that comes from where we was, and the people I know now are all characters, and they're all fairly sharp. And I think their love for football started from when I was little, playing out in the garden on a Sunday morning with your dads and all your mates and all your pals over the park.
Yeah. And talk to me about your kind of role models growing up. So who was your biggest role model growing up then?
Funny enough, we were speaking about this, and I think the one I can really remember stand out was the '70 World Cup, And obviously Bobby Moore was coming to the end. He was the England captain, and Bobby Charlton. So they were role models. They were people that you first got contacted with through football. And then growing up, Brian Robson was I really admired Brian Robson, and obviously George Best and them kind of players. That was the ones that I looked at. But I think Brian Robson had a big, I don't think there's much difference with our ages, but he was a little bit older. But the way I saw him, Trevor Francis, I liked as well. I admired Ray Wilkins, them kind of people.
Yeah. Where did your love for football start? Was it starting from kind of watching these players growing up, or did it start from your parents, or what really grabbed you into football?
I think, as again, getting back into your environment, I think is it nature over nurture, and I think it goes back to when I was a young kid. Everyone played out in the street. Street football had a big impact on the way I was brought up and how I dealt with. We were all different ankles, all thrown together. And I think you just love a football. And where I lived, there was a wall in front of me, and in the summer you'd be playing tennis and then put a cricket up. So them kind of things, it was always outside. But playing football was just a social thing that we all did, and your love for the game. And then I was fortunate that my father was in football, and my grandfather loved it. And I think everyone I was round, we all love football, and we just got on with it. And I think the love from it comes from that.
Neil, was it true that in also 1980 that you won the UEFA Cup for the under-18s with
Yeah,
England?
that's correct. Yeah, I was in the team. Yeah, we won it in. It was East Germany then, and we had to travel across Brandenburg from West Germany to East Germany, and that was a real contrast. I can remember going on there, and I'm the coach, and the East Germans getting on, looking at you and working for it, and we won in Leipzig, I think, and we beat Holland 2-1 in the final. 1-0. I think it was 1-0 in the final. I think, or 2-1. But we won out, and that was a great experience.
And what were the players that you played with them? And is there any players that went on to achieve really great things in that team?
Paul Allen was in the team. He was our captain. Tommy Kane was centre half. Bless him. He passed away. Andy Peake was in the side. Mark Aitley was up top, centre forward. So Paul Walsh was on the sub. Was in the side. Terry Gibson was up front with Mark Aitley. So there are some players that went on. So some really good careers there in football.
And also, when you look back on your playing career, how would you judge it from your perspective?
I think disappointing from the part that I didn't really have the career that I thought that I was going to have. For some one reason, you look back and you think wasn't maybe tall enough or quick enough, tall enough as a central defender, and some things just don't work out for some people. There's a lot of players that I've seen that you just don't have the career that they should have had. And then you're the ones you work with. I played alongside Stuart Robson in the Mini World Cup, and we got third place out in Australia, and he went on to a great career, and he's a great pundit now, Stuart. And I listened to him, and he's so insightful. I think you look back with a little bit of disappointment, but I really enjoyed my football. I played right up through into non-league and then going into coaching. So it's not been too bad.
How did you see yourself kind of being a coach? Where did that kind of journey start?
Again, I think my dad was a coach, and I used to go on courses with him, and my dad was in the South East Essex Coaching Association. Trevor Brooking was the chairman, and they used to come round to where we used to live over the island, and I was always round coaching, and I just think it was a natural progression. And I took my prelim when I was 17, because of that was my dad again saying to me, "Look, take it," and I think the lads take it now, not knowing what I was going to do with it, but it was nice to have. And then we went on to I got me full badge at 29, 30, I think, 30 years of age, and it was just a progression that but I enjoyed working with people, and I've worked with all different age groups, different qualities, different standards of football. I've worked with, used to work with, most people I've worked with.
For sure. Now talk to me about your Charlton Athletic role. So obviously that was your first big role in coaching in terms of the youth academy that you had there, and you set up there, and you kind of progressed there. Talk to me a bit more about that role for you.
Yeah, that was a good role. That was with Charlton with Stevie Gritt and Alan Kirbishley. I got the job at Charlton. Initially, it was working at Terence McMillan in the Centre of Excellence, and there were some really good players that come through there, and it just moved on to becoming I went in as a head of recruitment. Jimmy Hampson left and went to West Ham, John Cartwright was the head of the academy, and he took me in. And then I jumped across from head of recruitment into head youth coach, and we worked there for 5 years with all the players and working away. And yeah, it was really a good time.
And then you transitioned to obviously Arsenal. And how did that really source about, and how did that really come about?
Yeah, that came about. I knew Steve Rowley at the time, and Steve Rowley at the time asked me would I like to go across to Arsenal and work. It was in the academy, taking the under-14 team. So I decided to move across to Arsenal, and it was something. I think Arsenal was very close to my heart as a young lad growing up, and can always remember going to Arsenal and have one regret that I didn't sign associated schoolboys for them. And it was always close. We used to get on the coach and go out to London Colney. So and the standards that it had, Pat Rice and being the youth coach, and there was something for me for Arsenal. And I was fortunate enough to Steve invited me in to take the under-14s, not knowing where it would take me. It was just an opportunity that I couldn't turn down, really. So started there, and the rest, they say, is history.
At that age, when you were really young, you're obviously moving into coaching. Was there any influences that you had at that time that you kind of looked up to or kind of aspired to be?
Yeah, I've got to say, I think John Cartwright was a big influence in me as a coach. Being working with him as a player, and then working with him on my first coaching job at Charlton, and the way he worked and he saw the game and through street football, the way he had a big influence in my career as an early coach. And even now, I speak to John and we discuss things. I would say John Cartwright.
Yeah. And what were the key kind of lessons that you learned when your early coaching career? If you look back now and you change it, or you have any regrets, or you've learned over time about the early coaching career, because there's a lot of young managers out there now that are moving into these big jobs very, very fast. And what were kind of the lessons that you learned at that age?
I think we tried to we talk about enjoying their coaching. The young lads used to all come in, and I wanted to make them walk out with a smile on their face. So the session was always enjoyable for the young ones, and they were only 10s and 12 years of age. They wanted to come back. It was never hard on them. It was always encouragement, and no worries about making mistakes. It was come on, do it again. You'll get there in the end. It was an encouragement. It was a good area to work in. You could work in things, and you could work with the young players, and it was the enjoyment that the players gained. As long as the lads had a smile on their face when they walked off the training session, then I was happy.
Yeah. Neil, what are your thoughts on now really the youth is set up now in terms of the English football game, in terms of the way that the kind of development process is, in terms of the way that you get released or whatever, in terms of the way the clubs do it now? Obviously, you've got Crystal Palace have kind of a different way of doing it. If like a player gets released, they have an education pathway, or they have a new pathway for those players. What are your thoughts on it now, really, the academy since?
I think it's really moved on from when I was a young player, and when I was in that side of it. I think it was the old associated schoolboy, but the game's moved on now. We've got academies, and they got the welfare of the young players really at hand, because they take a lot of players into the academies now, and I think with that there comes a lot of more disappointment, because you're taking a lot on through the years. If you've had lads from 9s, 10s, 11s, 12, and then you release them at 15, then you've got an attachment to them, and I think you have a right to look after them and make sure they're okay, and you follow them right through till they get another club, and you help them as much as you can.
Me, Neil, that I just think, from my point of view, in terms of the amount of players I need in these academies, and the amount of that actually make it to the Premier League and make their first appearance, is so small. Do you think more needs to be done to help the players that do get released, in terms of what happens after football? Because normally a lot of these players, they stick all their hands in the basket and go, I just want football. They don't think elsewhere. Do you think more needs to be done in terms of their mental health and what happens after football?
Yeah, I think you're right, Ed. I think what you're saying there, I agree with you totally, but I do think it's probably one of the areas that I would really look at with the academy system, is that I think there's too many young players in the system. I think we bring that. It comes with disappointment, because I think every squad's got 12, 16 players from. I think they're nine. At 9, they're a young age, and then they easy with them. But once they get to 12, I think they carry a squad of 15,
Yeah.
you have discussions how many of them are ever going to play. So if you're looking at 12s, 13s, 14s, 15s, got 15 players, that's 60 that we do. Times that by 10, that's 600 lads. Just very quickly, and that could be, that's 600 boys that you've got to look at. You've got a welfare, and I think that what you're giving them, you have a responsibility to the care and attention for them. But I do think they make a rod. The clubs make a rod for their own back, where they do take too many young players in the system, and I think it dilutes the whole academy area. Where once again, without repeating myself, there's too many players in the system, I think.
Neil, you worked with one of the most legendary coaches of all time, hands on with him at Arsenal through a number of years. I just want to know how that really began and how you got to know him at the start of it and how it progressed throughout the years.
Oh well, I went into Arsenal, and then Liam Brady, David Dean decided to. I think it was very forward thinking, Mr. Dean. He organised the club where he would bring the manager in, and he brought Liam Brady in. So Liam Brady was always be in charge of the youth. He was director of the youth, and Arsene was director. That was the team coach, first manager, but head coach.
Yeah.
So if it didn't work out for Arsene, he would move, but it wouldn't affect the youth structure. But Arsene, obviously, what he come into and the way he set his way out and the way he worked, we had a great time with him. And I was fortunate enough to join a year after, and so it was actually I was in the club before Arsene came, but as a part time, but then coming through Liam. So spending 21 years alongside Arsene and seeing him grow and seeing the way he works and his thinking about developing young players and the way we should all handle young players was an excellent experience.
What set Arsene Wenger apart from all the other managers?
I think there's been some great managers. Obviously, Sir Alex Ferguson and the team that brought through there. I think Arsene was one of the most forward-thinking coaches that I work with. But I was fortunate enough to work with him for so long. I didn't really get a look at what it brings that other managers don't. But for me, working with him was his calmness and his compassion, and the way he wanted the game to be built, and your patience with young players. And his philosophy was that if I'm the manager and we are investing in young players through Mr. Dean and Liam Brady, then we have a right to make sure they do get the opportunity to play. But on the other side, they have to be good enough. And when he used to ask Neil, were they ready? I said, yeah, they're ready to play for you. You knew what that ready was. It wasn't just ready about going out there to play. It was always the mental side of things and the physical side of things, the tactical elements of the game as well. So we looked at a very in-depth way of the development of young players.
How did obviously I'm going to talk about kind of the younger players that you kind of progressed throughout the time that you had with him. About kind of one of those players being Jack Wilshere. How proud was it for you guys to see how he went straight onto the stage with England such a young age? And progressed for Arsenal and when there's early years, and how really good was he? And how really good was he?
Funny enough, I'm still in touch with Jack because Jack's starting his coaching now. He's now head of the under 18s at Arsenal. He's starting his coaching career. Yeah. But when you saw Jack, and I think there's players that come through my coaching career, and he was brought in by Sean O'Connor, Stevie Leonard. He was 11-year-old, was at Luton. But when you brought Jack in, you could see the way he played the game and how he handled the game at a young age. And then you had the likes of, but Jack came into the category of even like Wayne Rooney at 16. You could see they were ready. Cesc Fabregas. You could see at 17 they were going to be players. And Jack always played above his age, and it stretched him. And the way he worked the game, the way he played, and I think that develops from a young age. And Steve Williams from some great recruitment we had at Arsenal, and I think that's vital in an academy to have good recruitment. You've got to have it.
Yeah, and how do you manage those younger players that really do come off, at such a young age? It must be harder now with all these social media, etc. But how hard is it to really manage them?
Yeah, I'm not involved. I don't get involved in too much social media myself. But what I'm seeing and what I'm hearing, obviously, when my children have grown up and they deal with it a lot of the times, they see it. And I think Jack came up just at the start of it all, and it was not too much overexposure. What we tried to do, keep it quiet and keep Jack steady, and he had good parents, and they knew the situation and what he was going into. I think if you surround yourself with a a good family, or you've got good people around you, they can help you through it. And I just don't let all them side of it get through to you. So you just concentrate on your football, you enjoy your football, you take it on and away you go.
Now, if you were to really reflect on his on his whole his whole career, then how would you reflect on it?
On one, I'd say Jack was probably going to be one of the midfield players for England, would have played for England, and could have probably even been captain of England one day. Unfortunately, it got curtailed early through his injury, so that's an unfortunate situation. But I think Jack, for me, was an outstanding player for England and Arsenal.
Talk to me about in terms of how kind of the coaching worked at Arsenal. So in terms of, was Arsene more of an on-field coach, or were you the on-field coach, and how did that work in terms of the
No, no. When I was head of the elite group, which would come from the reserves, and we formed an elite group again. We had a technical committee, and Liam Brady was on it to begin with, and then Arsene, Bora Primrat, Pat Rice, myself, Baldy. We'd get together, but then we'd split up with Baldy and Liam and Bobby Arbour. These people, we had groups that we would work at, and we'll band them all together. We wasn't so. I just think sometimes you get ring-fenced by your age group. We was more on ability. We'd have an elite group and a development group, and we made no apologies by putting people up and leaving people out, and because we didn't think that they were ready. But we were honest with the parents, and we told them we will work with your lad, and hopefully he'll jump up and in. So it was all thought out, all structured out, and again, it was all through Arsene, and he would come in and tell us what he wanted, and how he wanted his young players to be able to handle the ball and physically capable to compete at Premier League level and also into Europe. And Liam was one of them who was driving the standards all the time. So we had a real clear vision and purpose and a structure to work from.
Yeah, Neil, I keep on hearing you kind of revert to how Arsene really managed the younger players and how he set the culture right. Talk to me more about kind of the culture that I want to know more about at Arsenal during that time, the elite high performance culture, because in these top clubs, that's how it is. So talk to me a bit more about what kind of culture that he set out.
I think the manager sets the culture, and he sets the way that he wants the players to work and the standards that he demands. And it wasn't. I think we get the tech that we talk about intense sessions. It's not about intense rah and shouting at them and driving them on. It's about the intensity of the passing, of the technique, of the skill, making sure the ball's on the right side, making sure it's passed at the right tempo, making sure their technique's right when they receive the ball. And it's the information you're giving the players. That was the intensity of the drill. And when you've got a good stand-up group, the intensity comes from within. They drive the session. But from coaches, you wanted good information passed on to the individual and to the players, and to make sure we was always looking at the players, because the players is developing the players for the first thing, because they're the team that matters for him.
Yeah, for sure. And then in terms of the later years there, you had players that I really want to know about the kind of this player now, about Sanchez, about how good he really was. I've heard a lot of coaches that he's worked with say how outstanding he was, such a small little techie player. Talk to me about working with him.
I was fortunate enough. I was really lucky to be on the same path as Sanchez. He was a wonderful player and driven and great enthusiasm. You don't really coaching them; you're just facilitating them, and they're in charge of their own careers. But his commitment to the team, commitment to the cause. He was a fierce competitor, and it was excellent to work with.
Yeah, in terms of the later years at Arsenal, but did you know that your time was coming to an end in terms of Arsene Wenger's time was coming to an end in that last 2 or 3 years?
Not particularly. I think it all took us all by surprise when he brought us in, and he said that he's going to be leaving. It was a little bit of a shock, and took us a little bit of time to get to actually work out in our own heads what we're going to do. But I think now looking back, I think being in football, you tend to get this. You get into I call it a perfect storm, that no matter what you do, you're never going to get out of it. And I think if me personally, if they could, everyone has their timeline. Of course they do, but I think with the young players that came through after, I think it was a season, maybe season and a half away for him really building again, but it wasn't to be. And then the club decided they wanted to go in a new direction. And it was Arsenal's time, so it was really sad at the time and a bit emotional, because when you're at a club for 21 years, you put a lot of your emotion into the club. You're attached to it. My son was a baby when he was born, and when I left, he was 21 basically. So my whole career, he'd known Arsenal Football Club.
I'm not afraid, and I really want to talk about this, because I want to know if it really kind of affected you guys at the time in the last year. A lot of fans at the time were holding banners up, having protests because they wanted Arsene Wenger out and put him onto the fresh start. Did that affect, do you think, his choice to leave the club?
I wouldn't say it was Arsene's choice. I think he's a battler. He's a fighter, and he knew that he could obviously. Everyone has their peaks and their low times, and I think he knew that. And but he felt that they were going in the right direction. But again, I wasn't actually privy to the full conversations what went on. But I think he decided that it was time. If that's what the club wanted to do, that's what. He'd had a great reign.
Yeah. Do you think he was underappreciated by the fans?
Yeah, for me, 100%. At the end, you some things that went on at banners. We was at club and they was flying over. It was disgusting. I felt what he'd done and achieved for the club. It was an absolutely disgrace for Arsenal.
Yeah, and now talk to me a bit more about the QPR kind of move, and how did that really come about?
Well, that came through Mark Warburton. Mark Warburton again was Mark was the youth coach at Watford when I was at Watford, and so they were just across the edges, and we would make games together, and we'd have a football relationship. Mark went on to Brentford, and then he got the role. We kept in touch with football and players. We'd let them go. They would want some of our players, so we always had a contact. And then Mark rang me up when I lost my job. He said, "Listen, Neil, I'm looking to find a role. Would you be interested?" And I said, "Look, Mark, love to." And then Mark rang and said, "Look, he's got the QPR job." He invited me to go along as his first team coach, along with John Eustace, who was in, and we had another good group of football people, and it was a real good, enjoyable time.
How does Mark really work in terms of his clubs? In terms of how did that really work at QPR? Because obviously I've talked to
Mark
Yeah.
was at his desk at 6 o'clock in the morning. He was a real worker. He didn't
Yeah.
leave in no stone unturned. I think what you learn from Mark is how intense he is with his work, and works so hard for the club and to do the right job. And it was a real privilege to work alongside Mark and see how hard he worked for the club.
Neil, I'm just gonna have to pause it here because the Zoom is gonna obviously run out. So then I'll send you a new link. How much of your time, Neil, there with work and with Mark and working with Mark, and you saying how kind of relentless he was? Do you think, in terms of the end of the tenure there, do you think you were given enough time?
QPR again. That was discussions that went on with Mark and the board above Mark. I think Mark done a great job for him. He kept them where they were. If he'd have got another period of time, I'm sure he would have continued. I'm sure he would have continued his good work for the club.
Yeah, in terms of also the structure at also QPR for the outside, obviously working with Les. How was that kind of relationship, and how close was Les with Mark and with you and with the first team?
Yeah, Les was very close to us and worked away. But Mark was obviously we had a very small budget, and he was always working with agents and people that he knew to get in and to do well for the club and get some good players into the club. It was difficult times financially for the club. They stood by us. We had the COVID period, and they were excellent. The board, and I think going through that period and coming out the other end and sustaining what he did, we had our little periods of times where we went on a run, we couldn't win. But overall, I think the club was in a really sound place when Mark decided to not renew his contract.
Do you think, in terms of the outside, because I've watched a lot of QPR over the years, a lot of fans are saying about the inconsistency, and is there the need for the next step? And over Mark's tenure there for 3 years, it was always a case of they were so near to really the playoffs. It was just about taking the next step. How close were you on really making that on really making the playoffs?
I think if you look at the budget that Mark had to have and what he used and how he utilised it the best of his abilities, there's going to be times where you're going to maybe have a little period of the results don't go your way. But I think with anything, it's what you can actually afford and go with, and what Mark got into the club and the way he directed the club and coached the team. I think when you're looking at what he achieved was first class, really.
In terms of the recruitment now, Neil, in terms of the way that it's done now with a sporting director, with recruitment, how big is it now really compared to maybe 10 years ago?
Well, I don't think. I think how big it is. I think Arsene used to say, scouting the big players. He knows all the players in the Premier League. That's not scouting or recruitment. Recruitment is the players underneath. When you find these diamonds and you dig them out from someone like Kante, Leicester got Kante and them kind of people. They're the ones that Arsenal was really looking for at Arsenal through Steve Rowley. And I think the work that was done from Steve Rowley and Andy Belk at QPR alongside Mark, I said, was just the same with the sporting director. And I think the titles will probably come in, but the people don't change in the work that you do. I think the work was really before we had a sporting director or we had head of recruitment and the head of coach was the manager who would do that one. So I think it's a good role now for the manager to lean on towards when he's managing up to the board. I think it's a good thing to have for him.
And then obviously Mark left, and obviously Michael Beale came in. Did he reach out to you to kind of carry on working?
Well, I was really fortunate. Les asked me if I'd like to stay on, and I said yes, I would. And he said because there might be another role within the club along with John Eustace, and then he said, look, I'd like you to see if Michael would keep you. And obviously I knew Michael from when way back when we was at Charlton as a young player, and we reconnected again, and he knew of me and I knew of Michael, and obviously we knew one another quite well. So Michael was very fortunate. So he had to think about it, and he thought no, and he offered me a role to go in with him, and it went remarkably well. When Michael decided to move up to Rangers, where his family was and his heart was, and he asked me to go. So it's been a really good journey.
In terms of Michael, where's an on-field coach? We know his reputation in terms of that is so impressive. A lot of big name players have said one of the best on-pitch coaches we've had. Talk to me a bit about why he's so really good at that.
I think when you look at Michael's not just turned up and become coach. He's been doing coaching. He was at Chelsea. I think it's 20 years he's been working. And I think sometimes it develops your coaching standards, the coaching the way you are. He's been working at his coaching for a long time now. And he's an extremely a good coach on the grass.
Yeah. In terms of the transition to QPR to obviously Rangers, talk to me about that transition. Obviously there was a lot of headlines about it. How did that really come about?
Well, I think Michael decided to join QPR, and then I think there was obviously Michael had a very, and rightly so, reputation of being a coach, and people were looking at it, and other clubs were looking at Michael. He had the opportunity to go to Wolves, and I'd just like to say that Michael family was always in Scotland, so his heart was in Scotland when he was there with Steven Gerrard. So when they come and actually approach the club, it was very difficult, Michael, to turn at Rangers down. He had a big feeling with the club. He'd won the title there with Steven Gerrard. His family, although they moved down from Glasgow round to the Birmingham area, they wanted to go back to Scotland. So I think Michael was very turned. His heart was turned to go back to Rangers and back to Scotland, and he decided to take it.
Do you understand the fans, how they would maybe be kind of a bit angry about that or not?
Yeah, obviously, I think again emotionally, I think that you can understand where they come from. But I think if they really look at it and say, okay, it wasn't just football. It was a family decision, and it pulled on his heartstrings, and it was Rangers Football Club, and he spent a lot of good times there. And as I said, his family, they was all at school there. His young family, so it was hard for him to turn down. I can understand it completely.
Do you understand also, Neil, in terms of the interview that he did, obviously coming out after the Wolves approach, saying that he's fully committed to the role? Do you think that probably didn't help him?
Well, I'm not so sure. I think he was honest, and he was honest with it, and I think he explained that. I think QPR was always aware that Rangers were the one club for him at the time, and yeah, that's Michael's decision. And again, what went on between the club and Michael.
And how big was the move to really Rangers? How big of a club did you walk into?
Well, Michael explained to us when we went back up, when we went to Scotland and we were inviting up with Damien Matthews and Harry Watley. We went up there and you go into Rangers and uh, the actual the actual size of the club it's a great club. It didn't take me surprise. I think I was very fortunate because I had my time at Arsenal.
Yeah.
So the size of Arsenal is phenomenal, but as a club, the size of Rangers is a big club as well.
Big club. In terms of the Rangers, talk to me about your kind of experiences or wars with the Celtic Rangers derby and how big that.
Oh, they again, Mark. To be fair, Mark Warburton, he told and he showed us some clips of videos, and it's something that it does take your breath away, and it makes the hairs on your back of your neck tingle when you're walking down the tunnel, and they're all singing, and obviously there was this fans issues where they wasn't allowing fans in, and
Yeah.
the games at Ibrox and the game at Celtic, it was you were solely had your own fans. But when we had the cup game and it was 50-50 at Hampden Park with Celtic and Rangers supporters, yeah, it was really exciting.
And I bet it was. I've seen loads of video clips over the times.
Oh yeah.
I've
Great games, and you feel the passion from both sets of fans and the fervour.
in terms of
It
sorry,
was great.
but in terms of that rivalry, do you think that's on scale with the one of the biggest in world football?
I think Rangers and Celtic, you'd have to put it as a one-off when they've both got their sets of fans in. Yeah,
Yeah.
without a doubt. I think you see some of these South American games and you see the passion there and the singing and everything. It's Mike showed us when he was out in Brazil. He was a coach out in Brazil. Excuse me, and the fervour and the fans are fantastic. But I think then once you go a long way to beat the intensity of them Celtic Rangers game.
Sure, Neil. And talk to me a bit about kind of the challenges that you and Walter Michael really faced at Rangers. Obviously, it's not an easy club to obviously manage. I was also talking to Mark on here, and he was saying how hard it was to really manage Rangers in terms of the expectation levels and etc. etc. So, talk to me about really the challenges that you guys faced there.
Yeah, I think what Mark touched on is spot on. I think it's the expectations of the club. You know, it's Celtic Rangers, and they're both vying for being the top club in Scotland. And I think overall, I think when you looked at it and what went in and what the time we spent there, it was I really enjoyed Scotland firstly, and Rangers as a club was fantastic. So again, not actually being there just under a year. Was a great experience.
And in terms of how would you reflect on your time there at really Rangers? Was it positive memories?
Yeah, 100% all positive. I think we had a couple of defeats on this part of the season, but the early part of this season. But I think if you look at it, when the turnaround, I think when Michael went in, he had a new chairman, the new chief exec. So Michael was thrown into an area that he had to work to get players in. And then there was a load of turning around of players coming and going. So
Yeah.
with that comes a little bit of uncertainty, and players take time to settle in and find their real true form. And it was always a matter of time, really.
Do you think it was a bit kind of I don't know the right word here because obviously Michael was known for being the on the pitch coach. Do you think that new role maybe hindered him a bit?
I'm not so sure. Possibly, yeah. I think it was at the time we were we were that part of the season when we first went that end of that season. It was going extremely well, but we knew we had to get some. Michael knew that he had to get some players in, yeah, because there was going to be a big turnaround of playing staff. So there was no other way for Michael to say, look, he didn't want to get caught short and wait, so he had to go get ahead and try and attract the players into the club.
Yeah. Did you know your time was up or not?
Again, yeah, I think I wouldn't say knowing that his time was up. I think it was just a situation we was in, and once again, it was conversations that was had above my head, and it was between Michael and the board.
For sure. In terms of now the future and what it holds for you now, obviously Michael's moved to Sunderland. Was that ever a possibility that you'd join him again?
I wouldn't say it was actually Sunderland, but we did speak, and we said we'd like to all work again together as a team. And Michael's again he's got the opportunity at Sunderland, and they've got a way that they work. They like the staff that they've got there, that's the football, that's the world we live in.
Yeah.
And maybe maybe in time we will work together. Who knows what's in store for us? But I'd like to think that there might be some opportunities, but it is what it is.
But in terms of your plans now next, though, in terms of what role that you want to go into, is it the same roles, or is it maybe more of an upward role in terms of like a director? Where are you thoughts are next?
I think I think being fortunate the career I've had, I think it's put me into we're spending a hell of a lot of time ahead of youth at Arsenal with Liam and then head of the elite group. So I've always had a big connection and kept me on the development. I like developing a young player, so I'm quite open to where I'd like to make my next foray into the game, whether it be as a sporting director or as a number 2 or as a head of academy. So, but opportunities are to come by, and there's a lot of good people out there vying for jobs. So hopefully something will drop for me, and it will come along. And scouting as well is something that's how I originally started at Rangers with Steven Gerrard. I was offered the role as a scout and go and work for him. So I've made a lot of contacts, and hopefully over the next few months something will open up and you can move on into your next role.
Yeah, well, what's your thoughts on all the coaches moving to Saudi Arabia? Would that be like a possibility if you got the like a role?
I think I think again, you look at the situation and when it arises, when it comes along, would you like to go? Yeah, of course you'd like to go. And so I think I've been very fortunate to spend a lot of time, obviously at Arsenal and Rangers, and then my first foray was when I was 60, up to Scotland. So and then you think, well, now I've sampled going from away from home, working away. I think I would quite enjoy that, and quite embrace it and have a go at it. Yes.
Neil, this is the last one now. Last point now. What is the biggest kind of leadership quality that every leader should have? Do you think, in your eyes?
Oh, that's a big one. I think compassion. I think you've got to be driven, but I think you've got to be compassion. That would.
Yeah.
There's a lot of things that go into making a manager and a leader, but for me, I would say compassion and honesty and be straight. There's quite a few things there I've leaned
Yeah.
on, but
Well,
I think they're the kind of
I think
things.
from me saying just one thing probably got your head a bit around.
Yeah, you
But
start to thinking, yeah, absolutely.
but it is
It's
hard.
hard to pinpoint. I think there's hard to one bit. I think you always try to be honest, whatever you do, and I think if the players know, they might not agree, and you might have your fallouts, but I think at the end of the day, if you can look someone straight in the face and you're honest with them, it might be the wrong decision, but I think your honesty is your best policy.
Neil, I've really enjoyed this, and I'm really enjoyed the honesty that you've obviously possessed. And I know it's not easy, obviously to answer all the questions, being honest at all times. But you've shown a lot of that here, and it's been a really privilege for me as a kid still to be able to interview someone as experienced as you and to learn off you. So I really appreciate it, Neil.
Edward, it's great, and speaking of an up and coming, I don't know where you're going to take your career, but I'm sure the way you've dealt with this interview and you've dealt with me, I don't see there's a problem for you. But keep an eye on you and see where your future holds. I'll be watching for you.
Thank you very much, Neil, and I appreciate it.
No problem.